Broadcasting live from the Capital OTB studios, this is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
On this Saturday morning, I'm Seth Merrow. Thanks for joining us. Nice stakes day across the country, really, so appropriately named Racing Across America, with a big stakes day in New York, a big stakes day out in Southern California. We will touch on all of that. We will be joined a little bit later by Frank Merrow, track announcer out at Santa Anita. Got some of his thoughts on the stakes action today out in Southern California. Talked to him yesterday, actually, but joining us live a little bit later on, the Big A, Anthony Stabile from the New York Racing Association. He will touch on some of those nice stakes this afternoon at Belmont, highlighted by the Carter. But I thought we'd start out as we are, 2 weeks away from the start of this year's Triple Crown. Who better to reach out to than Jeremy Planck, horseplayernow.com, countdown to the crown. Jeremy, good morning.
Hey, good morning. Good to be with you. And, I only do one voice, Seth, so I can't keep up with Frank. So you got me on first. I do no impression.
As I was prepping for Frank, normally I'll go back and look at Twitter feeds and I'll just pull up some information that may be interesting during an interview. And he had on his Twitter feed a throwback picture of him on, I guess it was the day before the Breeders' Cup a few years ago, where they did kind of an all-star day, and a bunch of prominent announcers did one race each, and Frank said he did two races. He did one race in his own voice, and he did another race in everybody else's voice.
Back in the early days when I was an intern, I organized at Churchill for 1994 before the Breeders' Cup. I organized the all-star announcers deal for that. So that was a lot of fun as a young guy to be able to call the different announcers around the country and say, hey, we'd like to have you come. And the funny thing about those guys was the first question out of everyone's mouth was, well, who else is coming?
Yeah, there you go.
They wanted to know, if Dave was coming, then Tom was coming, and and it was funny, and Trevor and everybody, and so, the announcers in the game are underrated. I think they're such a big part of how we remember races,
sure.
and that place and time, and one of the funny things about this pandemic, I'm already way off subject and probably behind time on you yet, but one thing about this pandemic is going back to these networks showing so many classic games and announcers, and you hear Keith Jackson and Howard Cosell doing baseball on ABC, and Bob Uecker and Joe Morgan and Bob Costas working together, and just some really neat announcing crews. But they do take you back to a place and time. You remember the call at Gibson's home run. You remember Larry Holmes's call, which is about 5 years ago today, I think, of American Pharoah winning the Triple Crown. They are a big part of how we remember things.
And I believe I read that NBC is replaying that Triple Crown, or the Belmont Stakes this afternoon, if people want to remember that. I remember being there. It's just incredible. But as you say, the announcing, regardless of the sport, brings you back to that time. And for people who aren't familiar, Frank Merrow, as we were kind of alluding to, does a great impression of a bunch of announcers. And typically he would do it at a couple of the racetracks he used to be at, the smaller racetracks, and I'm sure you can find those calls on YouTube, and they're well worth looking up. You kind of alluded to this as well by asking all my guests, how's your make the shutdown period so far?
So far, so good. Thankfully, for me personally, the shutdown in St. Albert is kind of like year. July 2001 was the last time I had to dress up and go into an office to work every day. I've been working in my socks and a T-shirt since 2001, and traveling for big races and things like that, but it hasn't been a culture shock for me, the work from home situation. And so, I'm grateful for that, and I'm very grateful that my family's all been healthy and everything's been fine. Where we are, we kind of live a little bit in the country, but we have a town that's had an outbreak. So where we are personally has been good, but our town has had a little bit of a hit. And so you got to be careful for sure, but it looks like we're on the other side of the bad stuff now.
Yeah, hopefully. It seems like on the racing side of things have returned to some sense, as close as we can get of some sense of normalcy over the past couple of weeks, and we'll continue to do so with Belmont jumping in this week. That was nice to see. All right, let's jump over to Countdown to the Crown, horseplayernow.com. First, when we talked to you earlier in the year, you had already kind of reconstituted Countdown to the Crown to have a little more content during the week, and you and Brian Spencer were doing some different things. That continues, but now with the reconstituted Triple Crown, Belmont June 20th, Kentucky Derby September 5th, Preakness October 3rd, how has that affected the content you're putting out on Countdown to the Crown?
Well, it's a little more sporadic. You know, we used to kind of do from the first Friday in January all the way through the Belmont Stakes preview, and so that would usually be 21, 22 weeks consecutively if the calendar would fall some years, and the placement of the races. This year, of course, we're kind of in that kind of wait and then wait again kind of mode. You know, we got to the Arkansas Derby, then we took a little break, then we came back for the Matt Win, and now back for the Santa Anita Derby. We'll be back for Belmont in 2 weeks, and then we'll kind of play it by ear as the campaign goes. We won't put it out every week that there's a points race, but the key points races. Obviously when it's Haskell Week and Travers and the big ones to come after the Belmont runs here in a couple weeks, then we'll keep it going all the way through. The end of the Triple Crown, and who knows, maybe the 14th Triple Crown winner will be crowned at Pimlico this year during the first week of October. I mean, it's a crazy year. I mean, I guess we're fortunate to have what we have. A lot of sports are just wondering if they are going to get back and when that might be and what it might look like. For horse racing, it hasn't looked much different. And in the ADW world and things like that, business has never been stronger. I mean, it's the fact that the racing industry hasn't taken a massive hit in total handle is a shocking surprise. Total handle's down like about 20% or something like that over the 2 months of the shutdown with hardly any of the content available. Now the content's coming back, and so I think I think business has been pretty strong throughout this, and I think that's a good thing. And the interesting countdown has continued, so we're going to keep putting it out and cranking it out. I put up at the top of the countdown report each week is like week 18. This is season 15. Season 15, week 18, and now it's like I just put ish behind it. It's like week 18-ish because I don't know. It's like the 18th one we put out, but it's really not week 18 anymore. So we'll keep that going throughout the season. But updated the top 20, got that back after a couple week hiatus because we didn't even know when the Kentucky Derby was going to be, what order the Triple Crown races were. It just seemed to me like it was kind of a pointless exercise to be putting out a top 20. So because by this time, most years, like we get to April, the top 20 is based on points and who's probably going to run in the Derby, and then we shuffle them around in that order. Now it doesn't really matter. So now we have just what we think the 20 top are right now, and it's a good list at the top this year.
Yeah, who would have thought that we would be going over and checking out Horse Player Now's Countdown to the Crown for the Travers, but I'm looking forward to it this year. So yeah, a little extended, one of the bonuses of the situation this year. But obviously, you had some thoughts on Countdown to the Crown coming into this weekend with this afternoon's Santa Anita Derby, a Grade 1 race worth $400,000, mile and an eighth, a nice field of 3-year-olds. And again, we interviewed Frank Miramati yesterday, and he's going to talk a little bit about this race as well. But I know from talking earlier in this year, you're high on Honor AP, reading the
he was pretty much lone speed in those races, and while he went fast enough into the San Felipe, I mean 46-3 was no shame at all. I mean that was a good, honest pace. It was, it was Honor AP having to stay within 2 lengths of that to try to keep up. I think I call it doing the dirty work. The horses like pressing in that second, third, first over mode have to do a lot of work, and when a good horse like Authentic is on the lead, you don't want to go after him too soon because you rob Peter to pay Paul, right? You soften him up, but you end up running last in doing so. In this case, the way this race sets up, Authentic's going to have a different pace scenario, and that's why I give Honor AP the nod back. I mean, I was pretty set, and it was just going to be Authentic, Honor AP back at a mile and eighth again, and I wouldn't change the order. I would just go with the San Felipe run back. But when Rushy got into the race, and you look at Shooter's Shoot, it's like, hey, look, this is even the playing field between these two a little bit. I don't think there's a massive gap between the two of them. I think they're both among the top 3, 4, 5 3-year-olds in the country. You're probably going to get 3 to 5 on Authentic and 2 to 1 on Honor AP, 9 to 5 on Honor AP. I don't think the difference between the two of them, given the pace scenario this time, is that big in terms of totes. So I think the fair odds are fairer for Honor AP, and that's why I would make him the top choice in the race. I don't think you can touch this race intra-race with any think an exacta is going to get you enough unless you want to play straight win money on Honor AP and say, you know what, $5.80, $6 might be a little bit of an overlay, which I don't necessarily want to get involved in that either. I think it becomes a race where you just have to use multi-race wagers to get into and get out of. Santa Anita's card today is much like that. There's going to be a lot of heavy favorites on the card. There's some smaller field sizes in some of the stakes and many of the races on the program. This is a classic day from a gambler standpoint at Santa Anita where you want to play multi-race wagers with focused tickets. You want to play a pick three that's got like 4 combinations, 1 by 2 by 2, and not play it for, $2 and have it for 50 cents, but you want to play it, for like a $5 ticket and spend your money that way and spend $40 over 3 races on a $5 pick three. That's a very focused ticket. I would use both in this case, but I think if you wanted to really get the value of Honor AP, the place to get the value is to single him in multi-race wagers because he is going to play a lot bigger than a 9 to 5 shot would if Authentic gets beat, because a lot of people will end up singling Authentic in the multi-race wagers. A lot of people at minimum will go too deep. And remember, if you go too deep, half of your tickets are losers right off the bat. So the value play today with Honor AP is to single him in the multi-race wagers. If you're right, that's the way to maximize your return on it.
I like it. That 8th race, the Santa Anita Derby, kicks off a pick 4, and I will give you a little hint since we talked to Frank Miramati earlier. He really liked a horse in the Cinema, which is race number 9. So stay tuned. Maybe he'll give you an interesting play to toss into that pick 4 ticket. All right, Jeremy, let's get over to your top 20. The countdown to the crown top 20 and touch on a couple of horses. And let's go right to the top. Charlatan, who comes off a win in the Arkansas Derby. You have that one at the top of your list. I'm curious, and we're going to watch the Arkansas Derby here, be the number 1 horse. And I'm curious your thoughts, given that Baffert, when Nadal was still running, kind of thought, man, maybe Charlatan goes to the Woody Stevens. And I'm always curious when trainers go plan A, plan B like that, but it is Bob Baffert. So Charlatan at number 1 for you, your thoughts?
This is a touchy situation, and it's hard to say a lot publicly about it. But, we know what's kind of been out there in social media. We know what the state steward Bernie Heddle in Arkansas said on the record. We know that the test is in Dallas. Put the horse in the Woody Stevens and knocked it towards the Belmont. I think there's a lot of controversy towards this race, right? There are no fans on site. If you put Charlatan in the Belmont Stakes, it's all a TV show. And so you've got to talk about everything about Charlatan, and he's got to litigate his case on national TV, right? NBC's going to be barking at him to talk about it and address the situation. You're still waiting for a split sample. I don't know if the split sample is going to be back in 2 weeks. It seemed to me the easier thing for him to do was say, Charlatan's not running in the Belmont, Nadal is. Then Nadal gets injured, and, as we've said a million times, necessity becomes the mother of invention. Now he needs a Belmont horse, right? Because Authentic's running this weekend, the Belmont's in 2 weeks, and now suddenly Charlatan becomes a Belmont potential horse again. I don't know, and I wouldn't be shocked if he still doesn't go. And given the situation and Bob's public relations thin ice and tightrope that he has to walk, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't run a horse in the Belmont at all. Maybe Charlatan still runs on the undercard. And then it's a race on, MSNBC or, on NBC Sports Network during the undercard, and they're not going to be interviewing trainers from afar and everything that goes with it. I mean, the safest thing for him, to his image and to what's going on and to protect that case that is still in much limbo would be for him to not have a horse in the Belmont. So I don't know what's going to happen there. If a horse runs well this weekend, Charlatan will be supplanted at number 1 in my mind. But for now, I had to go with what my eyeballs saw in Arkansas and what I've seen to this point. This is almost like handicapping on paper, right? Strip out everything you know and just looking at the horses on paper. That's why I have Charlatan on top this week. But that could change because what we see on paper is now Authentic and Honor AP get their chance at a mile and an eighth and a big one against each other. And one of those probably leaps up to number 1 with a victory.
Let's move down to number 2, and I'll read off your top 5. Charlatan, Maxfield, Authentic, Honor AP, and Tis the Law. And I find this interesting because after the Matt win a couple weeks ago down at Churchill, which we're going to take a look at, Maxfield comes out of that in the 3-year-old debut and looks very good. He's going to be the number 10 horse here, making a nice late sustained run. And I said after this race, I was on the air, and I said it's going to be interesting to see some of these, Derby, Belmont, Triple Crown lists now and see where Maxfield goes off of this effort. He goes up to number 2. Tis the Law at number 5 for you. Give us your thoughts on Maxfield, and we only have a couple of minutes left, but also Tis the Law at number 5.
Yeah, I think the top 5 are really strong horses. Beyond that, I think there's a massive drop-off in this crop, but 5 good 3-year-olds is pretty darn good for June 6th. I think Maxfield could be the best of these horses. I don't want to overblow that first race back. And what you need to see when a horse runs big off the layoff is how quickly do they get back on the workout tab, how do they move forward in that second off the layoff performance. But Maxfield, to me, was the best 2-year-old I scouted last year in Stakes Company, without question. His win in the Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland reigned supreme. I would have bet him with both hands had he not scratched in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Honor AP, I ranked number 1 coming into this season because Maxfield was coming off surgery, and Honor AP was the best undercard horse I saw in a maiden or allowance race at 2. And so I had Honor AP number 1 coming into the season. Maxfield, the question coming off of that ankle chip surgery. It was a minor surgery, but still, you don't know how the calendar is going to help him. Now the calendar does help him getting all the way to September. So I think Maxfield's a serious player towards the Kentucky Derby. And Tis the Law just keeps banging him out, right? He came back early in the campaign, ran twice at Gulfstream and ran really well. He looks to me like absolutely the horse to beat in the Belmont Stakes. If there was any question about him at all, it might have been like the 1.25 miles and 1.5 miles and those races. But the Belmont being a 1-turn 1 1/8 just really makes it better for him. I just think he's like custom made for that. I think he's going to be very difficult to beat in the Belmont Stakes, especially with Nadal out of there now, and maybe Baffert doesn't run anything. I mean, if Baffert doesn't run anything and you don't have horses running back on 2 weeks, and say Maxfield doesn't come back for the Belmont, which I think is kind of iffy. I don't think he's guaranteed to run in the Belmont. Tis the Law could be an odds-on favorite at the Belmont Stakes. He could be 4 to 5 in there with a couple horses not showing up.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what the field is in the Belmont, who shows up. That they're talking, probables of like 8, 9, 10, maybe 11. I'm shocked that $1 million, Grade 1, American Classic, there's not 20 of them beating down the door to fight their way into the starting gate. But we do have this weekend the Santa Anita Derby, July 11th, the Bluegrass, and so the schedule is a little funky this year. But we get to keep...
Yeah, no fans in the stand. There's not a great owner experience. And, Wayne Lucas once told me that the Kentucky Derby is the greatest recruiting tool. He always likes to use his coach's analogies, The best recruiting tool for owners is the Kentucky Derby. Get them there. Let them drink the juleps, be amongst the crowd, wear the fancy suits, and they will give you a lot of money in September to go to Keeneland for the sales. That's the plan. And so you don't have that lure with owners to go to an empty stadium Belmont. I think that's starting to show a little bit that there aren't just 20 dying to win the Belmont Stakes and start the Triple Crown. That experience is really a bigger part of the game than we think.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think you're probably onto something there. Jeremy, we appreciate the visit. HorsePlayerNow.com, Countdown to the Crown. You can check it out. Things are updated, as Jeremy said, points race weeks on Friday, but you also have the reviews with your partner, Brian Spencer. You can get many other playing products there as well. Jeremy, always appreciate the visit, and certainly we will talk again during this unusual Triple Crown season.
We'll keep counting, Seth.
Absolutely. Jeremy Plank, HorsePlayerNow.com, Countdown to the Crown. We will head to a break. When we come back, Frank Miramonte from Santa Anita. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Albany County, an incredible destination to live, work, and play, with easy connections to more than a dozen cities from our vibrant modern airport. It's a short trip downtown to a hive of culture and amusement, from world-class shows at the newly renovated Times Union Center to reliving the past at the New York State Museum. From outdoor recreation to shopping to nightlife, Albany County has something for everyone. We'll see you soon.
Hits apart as they move down the back stretch.
And he guides him down to the rail as the field turns for home.
A furlong to the finish.
The incomparable, invincible, unbeatable Cigar! It's too close to call!
He is moving like a tremendous machine.
Wagering on horse racing just got a lot easier at Capital OTB with our newly designed state-of-the-art mobile wagering site. Everything you need is right here on one easy-to-navigate mobile platform. Set your favorite tracks, pick your horses, place your bets, all with a simple tap of the screen. Plus, you'll have access to Capital OTB TV for all our network programming. So log on to CapitalOTBBet.com and see just how easy wagering on horse racing can be.
Good morning. How are you?
Very good. Now, I will ask, I've been asking everybody the past couple of weeks. I just got back in here the past couple of weeks. I had been sidelined and, like everybody else, quarantined at home over the past couple of months and enjoying racing from that perspective. But as I say, I've been asking all the guests over the past couple of weeks, how did you make it through the quarantine period?
It was very challenging on many fronts, but you just have to do what you have to do in these times. My biggest challenge was keeping my mom inside. My mom is 77 and loves to go to Costco, and I had to fight that off, and many requests for it. But there's nothing she enjoys more than pushing that cart around and picking things out. But I've done some shopping for her, and we've pretty much, my lovely lady Jennifer and I have stayed at home, and we've just followed the rules.
Excellent. Again, I think we all have. And we all had the good fortune of being able to watch a little horse racing and get that distraction. Santa Anita jumped back into the mix a couple of weeks back, and big day coming up on Saturday afternoon, so we certainly wanted to talk about that. But before we do, speaking of the quarantine, there was a story in Blood Horse that had some pictures, and I pulled up one of the pictures. Game plan for the jockeys is during the race week, they're essentially housed on track in these trailers?
They are. They have been, and they've been doing a good job of adhering to that. And in fact, a couple of our executives, Aidan Butler, who's the executive director of all of our California operations, and as well as the whole chief strategy officer for the entire Starnick Group, as well as Nate Newby, our assistant general manager and longtime vice president of marketing here before he was promoted. Both of them have actually hung out in their own RVs and are living alongside the jockeys, and I think that sets a great example from the old theory of we won't ask anyone to do what we wouldn't do ourselves. So good for both of them to set that example. Good for both of them to not require the announcer to be in an RV. I would not have liked that one bit. So I live close by. I live a boring lifestyle, and thankfully I'm wearing my mask and was out of that quarantine arrangement.
Well, that's a good question. What are your protocols? I mean, what do you have to go through every day? Obviously, in the booth, you're pretty much socially distanced just by the job description. But do you have to go through any special protocols daily?
Certainly, when I come in, I have to get my temperature checked, and if I do have a temperature, I would not be allowed on the facility. So that's a very big, important thing every day to make sure that my temperature is not too high. In fact, it's actually been lower than 98.6, which is interesting. I really didn't pay much attention to my temperature until now. So I take my temperature and then go in and wear a mask at all times. There's a time frame on the set. I've been doing the handicapping seminars with Tom Quigley starting at 11:20 the last few weeks, and I'm going to continue that this weekend, whereby we are allowed to take off our mask once we're seated and there's no one around us. So we do that without the mask, and everything else is pretty quiet. There are very few people in the press box. Mike Willman and his assistant are up there, and the two guys from Equibase, and that's it. There's no one else up in that area at all. Others are either working from home or reporters and such are, at home or wherever they are.
Yeah,
so
and
it's a very different environment.
I would say it's interesting watching the simulcast signal. I've seen you doing the pregame show and socially distanced, and there's social distancing, paddock interviews and post-race interviews. It is clearly a different time. But nice racing this weekend, and we wanted to touch on that Santa Anita Derby, Santa Anita Oaks, the Gold Cup, and we'll hit on all of those. I just wanted to touch on one more thing before we move forward with the racing, and I pulled up your Twitter feed in prep for the interview and saw some pictures of you with Arrogate, and I haven't mentioned it this week on some of the programming, so I thought this was a good opportunity to mention. Unfortunately, the 2016 three-year-old Eclipse champion and all-time money earner with $17 million passed away, was euthanized earlier this week due to some kind of health complications. but you had some great pictures up there. And we have one where he's kind of nuzzling your shoulder, but you said in the Twitter feed that at one point he took a little nip at you.
Well, I mentioned that, and I thought about it afterward. I guess if he wanted to bite me, he would have, but he certainly was very difficult to handle, and it looked like he was trying to bite me. It looked like he was trying to take a little piece out of my belly at one point in time. And, in fact, Baffert came over during that visit, and, he grabbed them and showed me how to do it. But I just figured with a horse of that quality, I didn't want to just be a wise guy and get that horse too rattled up and all of a sudden have there be a problem. So, in a sense, I was a little afraid of him, and rightfully so, because he had big teeth, and I was right next to him, and there's only one thing that can happen, and I'm not going to bite him. Well, so I was laughing quite a bit during the process, but there was a very kind moment when he did put his head up to me, similar almost in the way that Zenyatta did many years ago when I had the privilege of meeting her at Lane's End.
Yeah, we pulled up the picture from Twitter that has him kind of leaning his head on your shoulder. That's a great shot. All right, let's jump in now. Again, a nice stakes day on Saturday out in Southern California, and let's kick things off, and we'll kind of go through them chronologically. The fifth race on Saturday will be the Santa Anita Oaks. A couple of $100,000 up for grabs in a mile and a 16th. And Frank, while we talk, I am going to pull up the fantasy from Oaklawn, and we're going to look at the number 3 Swiss Skydiver, Get It Done, 16-1. After having won the Gulfstream Park Oaks at 9-1. The Ken McPeak horse, I like horses moving out of Oaklawn this time of year. I think the Oaklawn track gives fitness, and surprisingly, we have 3 horses coming out of Oaklawn in the Santa Anita Oaks. But I'll tilt a little towards Swiss Skydiver off of this performance in the fantasy. But Merneath from Bob Baffert. Speech is another horse coming in off a nice performance behind Gamine at Oaklawn. It's a field of 5, but I think there's some quality in here with Swiss Skydiver and the Baffert horse off the big maiden breaker last time. What do you think in the Oaks?
This is a very tough race. I really can't even make a final decision. It's so difficult because Merneath was so highly thought of. Baffert, over the last several years, we've been good friends, and every now and again he'll send me a text about a horse very close to post time acknowledging how great they are. The only 2 that have lost in the last maybe 5 years that he's texted me this, one is Merneath, believe it or not, in her debut. The other one was Arrogate. I was actually calling the races at Los Alamitos when Arrogate debuted, and I didn't see his text until after the race, but his text was very simple. 2 words. He said, killer here. And I guess he was right. That was a very good assessment. But both of those lost. So I know he's been very high on Merneath from the beginning. And the interesting thing about the other 2 participants in here, Merneath finally got it done in career start number 3. The beat she took in her second start was as wicked as it gets, but she just couldn't put that field away and then got caught. At Oaklawn, she dominated that field. A horse who finished well behind her that day was a Gary and Mary West horse whose name escapes me, but came back and absolutely romped when they ran at Churchill Downs. So to me, I guess if I'm put in the corner here, I'm going to pick Merneath because Speech looked like she had Gamine nailed, and I definitely respect that performance because I thought Gamine was a complete cinch that day, and Speech came at her and just missed. But the time before that, Donna Veloce really handled her with ease, and so did Auberge. And then Swiss Skydiver did go by Venetian Harbor. I think she's the one to beat because she's almost getting no respect at all after winning a grade 2 and a grade 3 in a row very, very comfortably. I would give her the second position, but I think I'm going to stick with Merneath just to find out what she's about once and for all, going around the ground, if she can duplicate that performance. It's a tough call, though. This is a race I don't have any strong view. I'm just looking forward to calling it. And Smiling Shirley, the number 4, is going to scratch out of this, so we're going to be down to a field of 4.
All right, a select field of 4, however. And while you were talking, I pulled up that chart. The Gary and Mary West, Ocean Breeze?
Yes.
Yeah, there
you
go.
She won by a block. She was the 11 horse about a week or so ago at Churchill Downs and absolutely just aired it out. And she was well thought of going into that race, and she was well behind Renee. She looked like she was going to be clearly second best and got nailed in the last couple of jumps for second that day.
Yeah, she was. She wound up 4th by just over half a length in that maiden breaker from Merneath. All right, let's move on to race 8 on Saturday, the Santa Anita Derby Grade 1 event, $400,000, 9 furlongs the trip. Another fun field in here. what will Ano Dior do? Will that one get back to the promise shown in the 2-year-old season? But all the attention will be focused on Honor AP, on Authentic, and I am going to pull up the San Felipe where they run 1-2. Authentic is going to be the number 4 horse in here for Bob Baffert. John Sheriff says Honor AP, and I think a lot of people like Honor AP, and I think a lot of people thought as a seasonal debut this was a good setup for Honor AP, so I think a lot of people are looking forward to the rematch on Saturday in the Santa Anita Derby. What are your thoughts?
I have to stay loyal to Honor AP. I've been a fan of his throughout his young career. I just felt that he's such a classy horse. And keep in mind, as I pick him in this race, let me tell you that I purposely pointed out that Authentic's win last time was a romp, despite the fact it was only just under 2.5 lengths. There was no question about who was best that day. Authentic was clearly the superior horse on that afternoon. And it wasn't as though, to me, I don't think it was even that Honor AP needed the race or anything of that nature, because Authentic was also coming off a couple of month break. But Honor AP is a horse that, early on I picked as a potential Kentucky Derby horse. I have to stick with that from a sentimental standpoint and maybe have this extra bit of distance in the race now that they're going 9 furlongs instead of 8.5. Maybe this plays into his hand, and I'm going to have to stick with him in this spot. I'll tell you a horse that I'm very impressed with as well in here is number 2, Rushy. Rushy, when he broke his maiden, I felt it was a stellar performance. If you go back and watch that win with Bejarano aboard, he was cruising throughout, in complete command throughout. It was another one of those races that was won by a length that could have been more. He then came back and got drilled in his next start, but you can smile when you see who got him by 10 lengths. It was Charlatan. And then he came back last time at Oaklawn and ran well. I think if you were looking for something crazy to happen and one of those other two maybe somehow, as we know, these races aren't defined in advance, I think Rushy will be no worse than third in here. I think he's a very talented colt.
Looking forward to it. Again, getting back on the Triple Crown Trail as it is this year with, the June, September, October Triple Crown, but it's fun to see the Santa Anita Derby in the mix this weekend.
If you don't mind me acknowledging also the great Jim McIndale stepping up for Santa Anita with the Run Happy Santa Anita Derby, and his sponsorship is deeply appreciated by the Stronach Group and by all the others in the industry, and so I just want to give him a tip of the cap for supporting racing at a time when it's very much needed.
And I will say, people smile at the Run Happy name that's been plastered over everything, but it's given an opportunity on some of the racing broadcasts to see profiles of Jim McIndale, who I think we have all, as if you're into the game, you've heard Mattress Mac, and with Run Happy, we followed that horse with him as the owner. But I think the profiles of him kind of fleshed out what kind of a guy he is. And down there in Texas, he's not just obviously very enthusiastic about the horse racing game and a very successful businessman, but just on the philanthropic side, just being a guy who cares a lot about his community. And as you noted with the executives you were talking about, gets in the mix down and dirty and lives up to what he says.
Mac is a great man. When I went through my health issues and I had to have a second surgery for colon cancer in 2016, he got me an appointment through one of the top people that works at MD Anderson in Houston, and I went there and I got genetic testing, and Mac actually walked in. Even when he brought me out, he picked me up at the airport, had me stay at his home, took me to the hospital. And a man like him walking through a cancer hospital, I did say to him, I said, I can do it. And he didn't mind walking through. And I'm sure when he walked through, some people thought, oh no, Mattress Mac might be sick. But that's just who he is and what he's all about. And as it turns out, I ended up getting my second surgery at Memorial Sloan later. But it was the genetic testing that I did at MD Anderson that Mac set up for me that made me make a very important decision not to have my entire colon removed, which could have happened and was actually suggested to happen. But based on the inconclusive nature of the test that MD Anderson provided, I opted for a more simple surgery, which I'm extremely grateful that I have, because it makes my life much easier today, obviously. So Mac is the man. He's been there for everybody, and I'm very proud to have initially helped him launch the Run Happy ad campaign. My good friend Ed Etheridge made his first Run Happy commercials, and I was on the freeway one day driving when Mac told me that he was going to become a huge advertiser on TVG, and at that time I arranged all that for him, and it was just a lot of fun and a lot of gratification now to see the relationship with Mattress Mac expand so dramatically throughout the industry. He loves to promote, and he loves to promote his agenda of Lasix-free and drug-free, and he's very proud of Run Happy, and he's looking forward to seeing some of his really good ones run in these upcoming meets in the summertime at Saratoga, Belmont, and Kentucky Downs, and also at Belmont Park.
Yeah, that's a great story. As I say, it's been fun to kind of get to know him better through some of the profiles that have been done, kind of in context or in touch with the Run Happy promotion as well. And it's going to be interesting to see what the Run Happies do now that they're starting to hit the track. That's going to be intriguing as well. All right, let's move on to the Gold Cup. 10th race on Saturday, Grade 1 event, $300,000, mile and a quarter, in what is shaping up to be a really stellar handicap division this year. I mean, a lot of the horses, the 3-year-old division last year was kind of funny. It was, you had Maximum Security, and then you had everybody else early in the year. And as the year progressed, we got past the halfway point into the fall, you were starting to see some horses really showing some nice promise on the 3-year-old scene. And now as they have debuted as 4-year-olds, boy, again, this is going to be a fun handicap division. And one of those horses that, you know, a talented 3-year-old, now 4-year-old that will be a player will be Improbable. I'm going to go back and look at the Oaklawn Mile. Tom's Day Tot, a solid player in this handicap division this year. The number 3 horse will win, but Improbable, number 14, runs second. He's in the field of the Gold Cup. Midcourt, coming off a couple of triple-digit buyers, is going to be interesting. Higher Power has the potential to run well for John Sadler. Your thoughts in the Gold Cup?
I'm a huge fan of Midcourts, and I'm going to stick with him now that John Sheriff is taking the blinkers off. He's a little quirky, and you'll probably know where you stand early on with Midcourt. I wish he would have been a little more aggressive in the Santa Anita handicap, but in the Hollywood Gold Cup with the blinkers off, I'm hoping he breaks well. That's when he's at his best and just goes right after the lead. I think he is the best horse in here. I think he does have more speed than his main 2 rivals. I've never really been sold on Improbable. I don't even know if he'd be my 3rd choice. There's something about him in Deep Stretch that I just don't trust over his career. And it's not fair to say that because Tom's Day Tot is a true professional who beat him. And Omaha Beach, we all know how good he was. And so if you really look deeply at Improbable's close losses, you can't really fault him. But, you know, you just sometimes are with someone and sometimes you're against them. I'm typically against Improbable. He's got behavioral issues sometimes at the gate, little quirky. I like Midcourt. I've been a big fan of his. I do want to touch on one more race, the Cinema, if you don't mind.
Sure.
At some point. Because this is the horse that I love more than anything on the day. Sometimes you don't get a chance to express your strongest opinion when covering a big stakes program. But in the 9th race, the Cinema, I absolutely love the 3, KP All Systems Go. This horse has just turned into a different horse. The Maiden Breaker was one of the most eye-catching performances. I'm surprised at the buyer being only 82, but he kicked in something fierce in the stretch that day, came back to validate that performance last time out with a win. He does face his stablemate Haribo in here, who is more accomplished on paper, having won the Pasadena last time out. But I really like KP All Systems Go. He is a very, very good horse, and I look for him to step up and beat this field in the 9th race, the Cinema.
All right, the Cinema, the 9th race, KP All Systems Go. No, I like it. Anytime you have a solid opinion, jump in with that. Before we let you go, I just wanted to circle back and alert people also there's a race that they will clearly want to pay attention to on Saturday. Race number 6. It's only a maiden race. Maiden special is going 6.5, but it will be the career debut of Cezanne, a $3.65 million auction purchase in the Bob Baffert barn, and there has been a lot of buzz about that when we talked to John White last week, and he made a point.
That was a merger of 2 friends, Gary West and John White.
You're exactly right.
The good thing is they actually work together. They work together at Lone Star, and they're very good friends to this day.
And I saw Gary on yesterday, and I think that's why it was stuck in my head. He was in the paddock yesterday out at Lone Star. But we had John White on last week, and he, as I say, made a point of bringing up this one. As you say, you're friendly with Bob Baffert. I'd love to know what you've heard about Cezanne and looking forward to the debut on Saturday in the 6th race.
I got to believe with these connections, son of Curlin, bred in partnership by Hillendale, which of course stands Curlin, and the money speaks for itself. When you debut a horse of this quality, what a bad draw to get the rail, but that's the time when he can show what a monster he is. All reports have been very positive on this horse, and I would expect that we're going to be able to see quite a show from him on this card.
Yeah, we're looking right now as we talk at the workout from May 30th, and Cezanne is on the outside here, and we'll pass the workmate in the stretch and run out nicely in prep for, again, the 6th race on Saturday, maiden special. A lot of people looking forward to this. You don't see, and the articles I read, he was the highest priced yearling since the Green Monkey. So hopefully we get a better performance as opposed to that one. But you would have to think what we've seen in the workouts and what we saw right here, we're in for something, a little bit of a treat maybe on Saturday. As again, with an embarrassment of riches, yet another talented 3-year-old potentially from Bob Baffert.
And you never know. Look, he did it with Justify. You never know just how good this horse is. He's got a little bit of time, and it's becoming almost like every year you want to test Bob a little bit deeper as to what he can do. And now maybe he can get a Kentucky Derby winner that debuts in June to add to his lofty resume of accomplishments, right?
I hadn't thought about that. Talk about a late start for the Derby. Very good.
No kidding, right?
Yeah. Frank, always appreciate the conversation. And as I say, we've been kind of rolling back into some sense of normalcy with racetracks around the country. Santa Anita a couple of weeks ago. It's been great to hear you back giving the calls and with the pregame shows and whatnot. So again, appreciate the conversation this morning, and we'll talk again.
Always a pleasure talking to you.
Frank Miramonte from Santa Anita. Big day on Saturday afternoon.
Wagering on horse racing just got a lot easier at Capital OTB with our newly designed state-of-the-art mobile wagering site. Everything you need is right here on one easy-to-navigate mobile platform. Set your favorite tracks, pick your horses, place your bets, all with a simple tap of the screen. Plus, you'll have access to Capital OTB TV for all our network programming. So log on to CapitalOTBBet.com and see just how easy wagering on horse racing can be. No matter where in the world you are, the excitement of wagering on horse racing is just a click away. You'll get live streaming, past performances, race replays, our virtual tote board, analysis and selections from professional handicappers, a simple, safe, and secure wagering platform, and best of all, you get track prices. CapitalOTBBet.com. Bet any place, anytime at CapitalOTBBet.com. And be sure to download our new mobile app from the iTunes Store or Google Play.
Birdstone is an outside front. They're coming down to the finish. Can Smarty Jones hold on? Here comes Birdstone. Birdstone surges past. Birdstone wins the Belmont Stakes. In front, but here comes High Chaparral. High Chaparral, the defending champ, to take it to Bob. These two arch rivals head to head with Joe Hart bearing down on them. It's going to be a 3-horse photo finish to the turn.
Racing across America on this Saturday morning, a big Saturday morning of stakes races. We've already talked a little bit of the action out at Santa Anita, but let's shift now to New York. Belmont opening up this past week, and good news for horse players, obviously. Certainly those of us here in upstate New York who like to focus on the New York tracks, and it is a big weekend of stakes races at Belmont. I thought who better to reach out to than our friend Anthony Stabile, the Big A. Good morning.
Morning, Seth. How are you? Welcome back, I guess, is the best way to put it, right? Happy to be back in action. 3 days into the Belmont meet, and just looking forward to the first big weekend between races here in New York and, of course, out in California with that Run Happy Santa Anita Derby. I'm pretty pumped for this Saturday.
Yeah, looking forward to the action this afternoon. Before we get into that, I've been asking everybody, how'd you make it through the shutdown period?
I have a mohawk. I've bounced around with weight. I've lost about 9 pounds the last 8 days, so trying to get some weight back off. Talking Horse is supposed to come back this Thursday, so got to try and alleviate that 150 pounds that the camera puts on. But, yeah, I mean, did a lot of cigar smoking, played a lot of horses. Thankfully, everybody stayed rolling, and we kept our programming. We didn't miss a day over at HRRN. I'm very proud of that. Mike Penna, Michelle Penna, we kept things going thanks to some racetracks I never thought I'd cover, like Will Rogers Downs and Bonner Park, of course, Gulfstream, Tampa, and Oaklawn. All did a good job keeping going through the pandemic, and happy to come out on the other side of it in one piece and ready to roll into the summer.
And as you say, Horse Racing Radio Network, you're part of the team there. Of course, NYRA as well. Talking Horses, next Thursday's the game plan to come back on television, but your picks, and you and Andy Serling have the picks every day on the NYRA website, so people can check those out. But we wanted to pick your brain a little bit on this afternoon's stakes races. Why don't we jump in and talk a little bit about the action this afternoon? And we'll mention that stakes action kicks off in race 6 with the Fort Marcy, but also have to mention that's the beginning of the Empire 6, which has a mandatory pay today of $101,000, so people should be aware of that. Fort Marcy on the grass at 1 1/8 Grade 2 event. And Anthony, while we talk, I'm going to pull up the Fort Lauderdale. This was back middle of December. Instilled Regard's going to be the number 4 horse. Subsequently ran 3rd in the Pegasus World Turf, and then threw in a little bit of a dud in the Munoz at Fairgrounds. But I still think the Chad Brown trainee, Instilled Regard, may be a little bit tough in here.
You know, that turf course at the Fairgrounds on the big days this winter certainly seemed to play into the fact of this is speedy hand. He kept going wire to wire in those 2 races, and it was hard to make up any kind of real ground. I think getting back to a more even turf course. Now, we've had some rain here the last couple of days as well, and I know it was labeled as firm. I don't know what the course is labeled right now, but there has to be some give in it. We had a couple of lines of good storms come through here the last 36 hours or so. So I would definitely keep that in mind when you're looking. I kept it in mind when I was handicapping, and I kind of landed on Flop Shot coming in for Chad Brown.
Yeah, I can see that one. It's Chad Brown, it's Peter Brandt, group placed over in Europe. I have that one down at the bottom of my mix. Years ago, and not too long, I would say most of my racing career up until about 2 or 3 years ago, Euros coming over here were an automatic for me. It seems like the last few years, I don't know, in my opinion, I think the American turfers have maybe improved, or I'm not sure how it's worked out, but I'm less likely to just automatically go to the Euros now.
I think I agree with you 100%, and I think the big reason for that is there are more Euros coming. The sample size they're sending over. This one's a little different, though. They tried this horse at a mile and a quarter the last 2 times, and Andre Fabre had this horse over in Europe, who's, for me, pound for pound, one of the best over there. You know, I think this horse is going to be more of a middle distance kind of horse. He won at the 1 1/8. He won a Grade 3 over there pretty easily. It was the most impressive race on paper anyway in his 6-race career. He makes a lot of sense to me. Social Paranoia is another horse. You know, he's been coming out the back the last couple of starts. And again, that day when he was 3rd behind stablemate Halliday in the Sunshine Forever, kind of a speed bias course, and Halliday was going to be left to his own devices on the front end. He was good in the Appleton when he passed them all in the last 3/8 of a mile. I've always been a fan of this horse. I think, he gets Manny Franco back in the boot. Manny's ridden him a handful of times. If you told me to use 1 or 2, it would be Flop Shot and Social Paranoia. But like I said, anybody can win this race.
Yeah, it's a fun and difficult start to the Empire, again, with that carryover and mandatory today. The Westchester Grade 3 event, race number 7 this afternoon, 1 1/16, fun field in here as well. Monongahela attracts my attention, but it's going to be interesting to see what these horses moving away from Jason Service do as they start to get back to the races. This one moves into the Chad Brown barn. So again, I'm maybe tilting a little in that direction. But while we talk, I'm going to pull up the Travers for last year. A, because we'll get to look at Code of Honor. B, just because it's good to think a little bit about Saratoga, watch the Saratoga race. But Code of Honor wins the Travers last year. Subsequently, runs a last year. There's a little recency for endorsed.
what Shug's trying to do, getting Code of Honor back off that long layoff. Again, mile and a 16th, and I don't think people give Big Sandy enough credit. They talk about the Belmont Stakes, and this is something that will come into play in 2 weeks. But these one-turn races, they're a grind, the first half of them especially. Remember, a mile and a 16th means 4.5 furlongs of straightaway. You're going 4.5 furlongs till you hit the far turn. That's a long way to run, right? In the Belmont Stakes, these 3-year-olds are going to go 5/8 of a mile without hitting a turn. So it's kind of a hard, tough row to hoe first time back. I think, look, the race goes through Code of Honor. He's easily one of the 2 or 3, one of the 2 most talented horses in the race. Let's see what Endorsed does. I like Endorsed with the recency. I think the mile and a 16th around the one turn is going to be just the doctor ordered for him. He's been good at this distance before, 2 for 2, but that was around 2 turns. I think the one turn is going to help his cause even more with Joel Rosario. You got to use Code of Honor if you're playing any kind of multis, pick 4s, pick 5s, Empire 6s. But I'll tell you what, Seth, I'm not just using the 2 of them. Payne has started to fulfill the promise the Connections thought about early on in this horse's career. It's taken him a couple of years now. I think he's another good example of leaving your horses in training, and this is what they can do. He's rattled off 3 in a row. They've gotten more impressive with each start. The extra 16th of a mile should not hurt this son of paint there. At a price, if Code of Honor is not ready, if Endorsed stubs his toe, maybe Payne's the one to pick up the pieces for that.
Interesting. Speaking of keeping the horses in training, I'll get your thoughts on performance over the past, 3 weeks, I guess we're talking now. What do you think about the return of Monomoy Girl, who I just applaud the Connections for keeping her in training after not being able to get back to the races last year?
I applaud everybody involved with Monomoy Girl. I applaud Jeff Bloom for keeping Midnight Bijou in training as well. We have Dunbar Road came back as a 4-year-old now, and Thursday's performance by Guarana, she might be better than all of them. I just don't know how far she wants to go. I'll tell you what, though, when you look at those 2 filly divisions, the sprinters and the distaff division, the longer fillies in theirs, man, there's a lot to look forward to this year. I'm so glad we got things back pointed in the right direction, because those fillies and mares, man, they're going to knock heads, and we're in for some exciting racing this summer from 7 furlongs to a mile and an 1/8.
Yeah, it really is. Unfortunately, we've had a funny season with no fans and stops and starts and whatnot, but it's shaping up when you look at the talent that we've seen on the track. It's really shaping up to be a great kind of second 2/3 of the year, and certainly a second half of the year. All right, let's move on to the Intercontinental this afternoon down at Belmont. Grade 3 event. They're on the grass at 7 furlongs. I pulled up the Noble Damsel. This is going back to September 21st last year at Belmont. It's a win by significant form. The number 5 horse subsequently went out to Del Mar and disappointed in the Matriarch. Has been off since that race, but comes back for Chad Brown on the outside in the 12-hole this afternoon. There is a main track only in there, so at worst we'll be leaving from the 11. But to me, I tilted in that direction. But Newspaper of Record, who had that great start to the career and then last year disappointed a little bit. Now she comes back in her 4-year-old debut for Chad and Klarovich. I'm just interested to see what she's going to do in here. But it's another.
Flew home in 11 and some change, a couple of pieces, and the mom and the race in Saratoga to Caress proved it was a little too short for her. Then she won the Boston Spa and the Noble Damsel. She's just a nice filly. Another one in training still at 5 years of age. She's just a nice filly. She's got that outside draw from going 7/8. That shouldn't be a problem. She's the one. Look, if Newspaper of Record shows up, if the old Newspaper of Record shows up, they're all running for second money. I know Chad Adder entered down at Gulfstream Park. Didn't want to run on a very firm turf. Again, we've had some rain here. It's a little humid here today. He's not going to have to worry about running on a firm turf. He's going to have some give in the ground. If she shows up, she's going to win. I don't care who comes with their best race. If Newspaper of Record shows up with her best race, she's going to crop dust these horses. You got to use significant form, and it's very hard to trust Newspaper of Record off of that 3-year-old form. So you got to spread. Villadera, Chad Brown, Rosario, Judgmont. Source gets Lasix for the first time, shipping over from Europe. We haven't seen this horse since last September, so it's a nice lengthy break. And I know her record at the distance really isn't that good. She's 0 for 4 going 7/8 of a mile, and she may need a little bit more ground. Maybe the mile, maybe even a mile and a 16th for her, but I'm not going to let Chad beat me. If I'm using the 2 Chads, I'm using 4 Chads. And Rose Flowers caught wet turf in all of her starts in America for trainer Christophe Clement. She got the money 2 starts back in an allowance race. Last time out in the autumn days, she did not have a good trip at all. Manny Franco climbs back aboard. She's the one at the price that if Chad doesn't get the money in the Intercontinental, I think it'll be Rose Flower.
Very good. Let's move on to the Carter. And as you said earlier, unfortunately, I was looking forward to Performer. I had put that one on top, but comes up with a little ding. Sounds like Performer's going to be fine, but just doesn't make this race this afternoon. So take out Shug's Performer. And after that, Forenzi Fire is intriguing to me on the horse for the course angle and moves into the Chad barn. Mind Control certainly has plenty of talent. And Vekoma, going to be interested to see what he does in the second start back of the season because the seasonal debut down at Gulfstream was very good. What are your thoughts in the Carter?
So it's funny. I was a big fan. I'm a big fan of Performer. And I thought Performer was going to get the money today. And I was kind of prepared to single Performer in my Empire 6. My biggest fear doing so was Mind Control. And now the horse that I like a lot comes out. I've had this instance happen quite a few times, and more often than not to brag, but I come out on the right side of things. When a horse I really like comes out of a race, and I only think one horse can beat him, I almost like the one horse that can beat him that's left even more because there's nobody left to beat him in my eyes. And that's how I feel about Mind Control. Vekoma ran well. Vekoma had a very good setup first time. He's got to do it again. You know, he's had his issues. He's had his breaks in his form. Mind Control, he just keeps plugging along. And if you look at his form, he's 4 for 6 with a third going 7/8 of a mile. You can look at his 2 7 furlong races. He should have won the Concern. Should have been unsaddled in the Concern at Laurel. He was blocked for 1/8 of a mile, and he got beat a neck. So he was best that day. He didn't have a great trip in the Woody Stevens either last year when he was beaten just 4 lengths, and you could argue he may have been best that day. I don't know if it was 4 lengths worth of trouble. Whatever the case may be, he is a 7 furlong specialist, and he's running in a race that sets up very nicely for him. He has plenty of tactical speed. He won't be too far off of it. Whoever does decide to go in here, I mean, he won't be in this heat now with Performer out of here. Can you see him being 2 lengths off this lead? I don't think he'll be 2 lengths off this lead. You know, if he really wanted to, he probably could get in front. So I think this race really goes through Mind Control now. Forensic Fire, you ask yourself the question, the Jason Service factor. This horse loves Belmont Park. He's a Grade 1 winner here. He won the 2017 Champagne over 2-year-old champion, Good Magic. What kind of factor is Jason Service? I mean, we're going to have to start talking about this as these horses come off these layoffs and into these big spots. I don't know what you do with this horse today. I really don't. Personally, I think he's in a little tough. He's probably got to be forwardly placed early on because he's drawn inside and there's not a ton of speed in here. I don't really think that's his game. So I don't like the draw. I don't like the trip he figures to sit. I'm all in at this point on Mind Control.
Yeah, easy to root for, too. You know, Greg Sacco, a guy who is not one of the big names, the more prominent names, but he certainly had some nice horses. And Mind Control, Greg and his brother and their team have really managed the horse very well. $1 million in the bank, and I had him right underneath. But again, my top pick scratched, and so the confidence level changes a little bit. But it's a fun end to the stakes sequence at Belmont this afternoon. And again, with the Empire 6, the carryover and the mandatory, you'll want to jump in. Anthony, we appreciate the visit. We are happy to have you and the NYRA team back and racing at Belmont, and looking forward to tuning in next week when Talking Horses returns.
Yeah, can't wait. Thanks, Seth. We'll talk to you guys soon.
All right, talk to you again. Anthony Stabile from NYRA Horse Racing Radio Network, and, of course, Talking Horses, as he said, returns next Thursday. That's the schedule anyway, where he and Andy Serling will do the pregame for the Belmont cards going forward. But with no Talking Horses currently, I'm going to take a quick break. We'll wrap up Racing Across America, and we will come back with a short handicapper's report looking at today's Belmont card in total. Before I wrap up, do want to thank Anthony Stabile for joining me this morning, Frank Miramotti, and Jeremy Plonk. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we want to thank you for tuning in. Again, we'll take a quick break. Be back in a couple with the handicapper's report for this Saturday afternoon. Stay tuned.
You're watching Capital OTB TV. Wager at CapitalOTBBet.com for the most comprehensive wagering site and the best player rewards in New York State.